Welcome back to Simply About Earth, where we explore the forgotten corners of human history, one whispered secret at a time. Tonight, we're stepping into the mist-shrouded world of ancient Japan, a civilization so refined, so deadly, so steeped in mystery, that even today, centuries later, we're still discovering secrets hidden in plain sight. But before we begin this journey into the shadows of the samurai, drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from tonight. Maybe you're curled up in a quiet room somewhere, far from the chaos of the modern world, or perhaps you're listening from a place where the echoes of ancient warriors still seem to whisper in the wind. We love knowing where our global community gathers to explore these hidden chapters of history. Dim your lights, settle into that familiar space where time bends and stories come alive, because tonight we're traveling to a Japan that existed long before the world knew its name. A Japan of shadowed castles and moonlit temples, of warriors whose very souls were forged in steel and honor, of secrets so profound that they shaped not just a nation but an entire philosophy of life and death. This isn't just the story of the samurai you think you know. This is the story of a lost civilization, a world within a world that existed for over 700 years in almost complete isolation from the rest of humanity. Tonight, we'll uncover the hidden truths behind the most mysterious warrior class in human history, and discover how their secrets still influence the world today. So breathe deep, let the modern world fade away, and step with us into the misty mountains of feudal Japan, where honor was more precious than life, and death was just another form of art. The year is 1185, and in the mountain passes of Japan, something extraordinary is taking shape. Not just a warrior class, not just a government, but an entire civilization built around a single, uncompromising principle that the way of death is the way of life. Picture, if you will, a land of contradictions, where the most delicate cherry blossoms bloom beside the sharpest steel, where poetry and philosophy flow like water through the same hands that can end a life in a single, perfect stroke. This is Japan in the age of the rising samurai, a world so foreign to our modern understanding that it might as well exist on another planet. But here's what most people don't realize. The samurai weren't just warriors. They weren't just soldiers in elaborate armor fighting for feudal lords. The samurai were the architects of an entirely unique civilization, one that would develop in almost complete isolation for nearly 3 centuries, creating customs, philosophies, and technologies that existed nowhere else on Earth. Imagine living in a world where your social position, your spiritual beliefs, your artistic expression, and your very identity were all determined by how willing you were to die. Not just to die, but to die perfectly. To die with such grace, such honor, such absolute commitment to principle, that your death itself became a work of art, a statement of philosophy, a gift to the universe. This was the world of the samurai, and tonight we're going to explore secrets of this lost civilization that most people never learn. Secrets about their training methods that bordered on the supernatural, their spiritual practices that merged Buddhism, Shintoism, and something else entirely, their technological innovations that were centuries ahead of their time, and their social structures that created one of the most stable societies in human history. The samurai didn't just fight battles, they created an entire way of being human, and the traces of their influence can be found in everything from modern martial arts to contemporary business philosophy, from the design of Japanese gardens to the code that governs artificial intelligence development in Tokyo today. But to understand the true secrets of the samurai, we need to go back further than most histories dare to venture. We need to go back to the fog-shrouded origins of Japan itself, to a time when the islands were inhabited by people whose names have been lost to time, and whose descendants would one day become the most feared and respected warriors the world has ever known. The true story begins not with the first samurai, but with the first Japanese, and that story is far stranger than anyone imagined. Long before there were samurai, long before there were emperors or shoguns or any of the political structures we associate with feudal Japan, there were the Germain people. For over 10,000 years they lived on the Japanese islands, developing a culture so sophisticated, so in harmony with their environment, that archaeologists are still trying to understand how they achieved what they did. The Jomon created pottery so intricate, so beautiful, that examples from 5,000 years ago look like they could have been made yesterday by master artisans. They built settlements that lasted for millennia, not decades or centuries, but literally thousands of years. They developed a form of spirituality so deeply connected to the natural world that its echoes can still be found in every aspect of Japanese culture today. But here's where the story gets interesting, and where most histories stop talking. Because around 300 BCE, something happened. New people arrived on the Japanese islands, people who brought with them rice cultivation, bronze working, iron forging, and something else. Something that would eventually become the warrior spirit that defined the samurai. These new arrivals, called the Yayoi, didn't just settle in Japan. They merged with the Jomon in ways that created something entirely new. A hybrid culture that combined the Jomon's deep spiritual connection to the land with the Yayoi's advanced technologies, something else. Something that no other civilization on Earth possessed. Archaeological evidence suggests that this merger wasn't peaceful, but it wasn't exactly conquest either. It was something more complex, more subtle. The Yayoi brought not just technology, but a philosophy of life that was fundamentally different from anything the Jomon had experienced. A philosophy that saw conflict not as something to be avoided, but as something to be perfected. And from this merger, from this collision of two completely different ways of understanding what it means to be human, the seeds of the samurai were planted. But those seeds wouldn't sprout for almost 1,000 years, and when they did, they would grow into something that no one could have predicted. If you're enjoying this journey into the hidden history of Japan so far, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps us know that these deep dives into forgotten civilizations are resonating with our community, and it encourages us to keep exploring the mysteries that mainstream history often overlooks. The first true samurai emerged from the chaos of the Heian period, a time when the central government in Kyoto was losing control of the distant provinces. Local landowners began hiring warriors to protect their estates, but these weren't just soldiers for hire. They were something entirely new, a warrior class that combined military skill with an almost mystical dedication to honor, loyalty, and spiritual perfection. The word samurai itself comes from the verb saburo, which means to serve. But the kind of service these warriors provided went far beyond anything that had existed before. They didn't just serve their lords, they served an ideal of perfection that encompassed every aspect of human existence, from the way they held a sword to the way they arranged flowers, from the poems they wrote to the way they prepared for death. And death was always present in the samurai worldview, not as something to be feared or avoided, but as the ultimate test of everything they had learned about life. The samurai believed that a person's true character could only be revealed in the moment of death, and so they spent their entire lives preparing for that single perfect moment. This obsession with death led to innovations in training, philosophy, and technology that were unlike anything else in the world. The samurai developed martial arts that were as much spiritual practices as they were combat techniques. They created weapons that were not just tools of war, but works of art imbued with spiritual significance. They built castles that were as much temples as they were fortresses, and they developed a code of conduct that governed every moment of their existence. But perhaps most remarkably, they created a society that was both incredibly rigid and incredibly dynamic. A society where everyone knew their place, but where that place was determined not by birth alone, but by dedication to perfection. Where a farmer's son could become a lord if he demonstrated sufficient mastery of the warrior's way, and where a lord could lose everything if he failed to live up to the impossible standards of samurai honor. This wasn't just a military system, it was a completely different way of organizing human society. And it worked. For over 700 years, this samurai-led civilization created one of the most stable, prosperous, and culturally sophisticated societies in human history. But stability came at a price, and that price was isolation. The samurai civilization developed its most distinctive characteristics during the Sakoku period, nearly 2.5 centuries, when Japan was almost completely cut off from the rest of the world. And during those centuries of isolation, something extraordinary happened. The samurai didn't just maintain their civilization, they perfected it. They pushed every aspect of their culture to levels of refinement that bordered on the supernatural. Their martial arts became so sophisticated that masters could defeat opponents without touching them. Their philosophy became so subtle that they could find enlightenment in the simple act of brewing tea. Their technology became so advanced that they created alloys that modern science is still trying to understand. And their Their secrets became so profound that even today, centuries after the samurai class was officially abolished, we're still discovering aspects of their civilization that challenge everything we think we know about human potential. In the misty mountains of Japan, hidden temples still exist where monks practice forms of meditation that were originally developed by samurai warriors. In the ancient sword schools of Tokyo, masters still teach techniques that were created 800 years ago, techniques that incorporate principles of physics and psychology that weren't officially discovered by Western science until the 20th century. In the traditional gardens of Kyoto, landscape architects still follow design principles that the samurai believed could induce specific states of consciousness in anyone who walked through them. And in the corporate boardrooms of modern Japan, business leaders still make decisions based on philosophical principles that were first articulated by warrior philosophers in the 13th century. The influence of the samurai civilization extends far beyond Japan, far beyond martial arts, far beyond anything most people realize. The samurai approach to perfection, their integration of spiritual practice with practical skill, their understanding of how individual excellence contributes to social harmony. These ideas have quietly influenced everything from modern manufacturing techniques to contemporary approaches to education and personal development. But to truly understand the depth of samurai influence, we need to look at the secrets they kept, the hidden practices that were never written down, the esoteric techniques that were passed from master to student in unbroken chains that stretch back centuries, the philosophical insights that they believed were too powerful to share with anyone who hadn't proven themselves worthy through years of dedication and sacrifice. These secrets weren't kept hidden because the samurai were secretive by nature. They were kept hidden because the samurai understood something about human potential that most civilizations have never grasped. They understood that certain kinds of knowledge, certain kinds of power, can only be safely possessed by people who have undergone the kind of spiritual and psychological transformation that the samurai way of life demanded. And tonight, we're going to explore some of those secrets. Deep in the mountains of central Japan, there's a temple that most guidebooks don't mention. It's not because the temple is secret. It's because what happens there is so far outside most people's understanding of reality that describing it accurately would sound like fiction. This temple, Shofukuji, has been continuously inhabited by warrior monks for over 800 years. The monks who live there today practice the same meditative and martial disciplines that their predecessors developed during the height of the samurai period. And what they can do, what they can demonstrably, repeatedly, verifiably do, challenges everything modern science thinks it knows about the limits of human capability. Visitors to Shofukuji report seeing monks who can sit motionless in meditation for days at a time, not hours, not a single day, but multiple days without food, water, or apparent consciousness of their surroundings. Monks who can break boards and stones with their bare hands, not through brute force, but through techniques that seem to involve manipulating some kind of energy that Western science doesn't have names for. Most remarkably, monks who can enter states of consciousness so profound that they can slow their heartbeats to undetectable levels, lower their body temperature by significant degrees, and demonstrate levels of pain tolerance that medical professionals describe as impossible. These aren't legends, these aren't stories from the distant past. These are documented observations from contemporary visitors, including scientists and researchers who went to Shofukuji specifically to investigate whether the claims about samurai-era mental and physical training techniques had any basis in reality. And what they found was that the techniques were not only real, they were far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. The monks at Shofukuji practice what they call Shinjin Ichinyo, the unity of mind and body. It's a training method that the samurai developed to prepare for battle, but it goes far beyond anything that most people would recognize as martial arts training. It's a systematic approach to expanding human consciousness and capability that incorporates elements of meditation, physical conditioning, breath work, and something else, something that the monks describe as learning to become friends with death. The samurai understood that most human limitations aren't physical, they're psychological. They're based on fears and assumptions about what's possible that have no real foundation in reality, and they developed training methods specifically designed to dissolve those limitations, to push the human mind and body into territories that most people never even imagine. The warrior who could remain calm and focused while facing multiple opponents wasn't demonstrating supernatural powers. He was demonstrating what becomes possible when the mind is freed from the fears and distractions that normally dominate human consciousness. The samurai who could endure incredible physical hardship without losing his composure wasn't superhuman. He was demonstrating what the human spirit is capable of when it's been properly trained and prepared. But this training came at a cost, and that cost was the willingness to truly, completely, absolutely embrace the possibility of death. The samurai didn't just accept that they might die in battle, they cultivated a psychological state in which death became irrelevant. Not because they didn't value life, but because they had discovered something about the nature of consciousness that made the ordinary fear of death seem like an illusion. This discovery, this fundamental insight into the nature of human existence, became the foundation of everything the samurai achieved. Their martial arts, their philosophy, their approach to politics and social organization, their aesthetic sensibilities, everything flowed from this single profound realization about what human beings are actually capable of when they stop limiting themselves with unnecessary fears. And the techniques they developed to cultivate this state of consciousness, these techniques still exist, they're still being practiced, and they're still producing results that challenge everything most people believe about the limits of human potential. If you're finding these revelations about the hidden depths of samurai civilization as fascinating as we are, this would be a perfect time to subscribe to Simply About Earth. We dive deep into the forgotten mysteries of human history, the stories that textbooks don't tell, the secrets that ancient civilizations discovered and sometimes took to their graves. Your subscription helps us continue bringing these hidden chapters of human achievement to light. The martial arts that emerged from the samurai tradition weren't just fighting techniques, they were complete systems of human development. Systems designed to transform not just the warrior's physical capabilities, but his entire relationship with reality itself. Take, for example, the art of sword fighting that the samurai elevated to heights that no other civilization has ever approached. The Japanese sword, the katana, wasn't just a weapon, it was a spiritual tool, a meditation object, a physical manifestation of the samurai's soul. The process of forging a katana involved rituals and techniques that were as much spiritual practice as they were metallurgy. Master swordsmiths would purify themselves through fasting and meditation before beginning work on a new blade. They would select their materials not just based on their physical properties, but based on their spiritual significance. They would time their work to coincide with specific phases of the moon, specific weather conditions, specific states of consciousness that they believed would imbue the finished sword with particular qualities. The result was weapons that were not just functionally superior to anything else in the world. They were weapons that seemed to possess their own consciousness, their own intent, their own relationship with the warrior who wielded them. Samurai described their swords as partners rather than tools, as teachers rather than instruments. They spoke of swords that would guide their hands in battle, swords that would vibrate or grow warm when danger was near, swords that would refuse to cut unless the cause was just. Modern metallurgists who have studied ancient Japanese swords report finding alloy compositions and folding techniques that they still can't fully explain. The steel in some katana exhibits properties that shouldn't be possible given the technology available when they were made. Carbon distributions that seem to have been controlled at the molecular level, edge geometries that optimize cutting efficiency in ways that computer modeling is only beginning to understand. But the physical properties of the swords were only the beginning. The real secrets lay in how the samurai learned to use them. The training methods developed in the classical sword schools of Japan were unlike anything else in the world. Students didn't just learn to fight, they learned to enter altered states of consciousness, in which the boundaries between self and sword, between intention and action, between thought and movement, would dissolve completely. The state they called mushin, no mind, was a condition in which the conscious intellect would step aside and allow the body's innate wisdom to respond directly to whatever situation arose. In this state, the swordsman could react to attacks before his conscious mind even registered that they were coming. He could flow through complex combat sequences without any sense of planning or decision-making, moving as naturally and effortlessly as water flowing downhill. Masters who achieved this level of skill were said to be untouchable in combat, not because they were physically faster or stronger than their opponents, but because they had transcended the normal limitations of human reaction time and situational awareness. They fought from a state of consciousness that was simultaneously completely relaxed and completely alert, completely empty and completely responsive. And this wasn't just theory. This wasn't just philosophy. Students who underwent proper training in the classical traditions could demonstrably achieve these states. Modern practitioners who follow the original training methods report experiences that sound supernatural, but are simply the natural result of systematic mental and physical conditioning. The ability to sense an opponent's intentions before he acts. The ability to remain calm and focused under extreme pressure. The ability to move with perfect efficiency and timing, even in chaotic situations. These capabilities weren't considered magical by the samurai. They were considered the normal result of proper training. But proper training meant more than just practicing sword techniques. It meant undertaking a complete transformation of consciousness, a systematic dismantling of all the fears, assumptions, and mental habits that prevent most people from accessing their full potential. The samurai training schools were essentially laboratories for human transformation, places where individuals could explore the absolute limits of what it means to be human, and discover that those limits were much further than anyone had imagined. The philosophy that guided this transformation was unlike anything that existed in other cultures. It combined elements of Zen Buddhism, Confucianism, and Shintoism, but it added something else, something uniquely Japanese, something that arose from the particular conditions of life in medieval Japan, where the constant possibility of sudden death created an urgency about spiritual development that didn't exist in more peaceful societies. This philosophy, this uniquely samurai approach to life, became known as bushido, the way of the warrior. But bushido was much more than a code of military conduct. It was a complete approach to human existence, a way of living that could transform an ordinary person into something approaching the ideal of human perfection. The principles of bushido weren't abstract concepts. They were practical guidelines for how to live, think, and act in ways that would maximize both individual development and social harmony. They provided a framework for making decisions, handling conflict, facing adversity, and pursuing excellence that was so effective it created one of the most sophisticated civilizations in human history. And the secrets of bushido, the deeper principles that guided samurai thinking and behavior, these secrets are still relevant today, still applicable to the challenges that face anyone who wants to live with purpose, integrity, and excellence in a complex and often chaotic world. The heart of bushido was the understanding that external circumstances don't determine internal experience, that a person's response to whatever situation arises is always a choice, and that by choosing responses that align with principles of honor, courage, loyalty, and compassion, it's possible to maintain inner peace and clarity regardless of what's happening in the external world. This sounds simple, but the samurai developed practices and disciplines that made it real, that transformed it from a philosophical concept into a lived reality. They practiced regular meditation, not just as a spiritual exercise, but as a form of mental conditioning that would allow them to remain centered and focused under any circumstances. They studied poetry and calligraphy, not just as artistic pursuits, but as ways of cultivating sensitivity and precision that would carry over into every aspect of their lives. They practiced elaborate tea ceremonies, not just as social rituals, but as exercises in mindfulness and attention to detail that would train them to notice subtleties that most people miss. They studied flower arrangement, not just as decoration, but as a way of understanding balance, proportion, and natural harmony that would inform their approach to everything from architecture to military strategy. Everything in the samurai's life was connected. Every activity was both an end in itself and a means of cultivating the mental and spiritual qualities that would make him more effective as a warrior, more valuable as a citizen, and more complete as a human being. This integration of art, spirituality, and practical skill created individuals who were remarkably capable and remarkably centered, warriors who could shift seamlessly from composing delicate haiku to engaging in deadly combat, administrators who could manage complex political situations with the same precision and elegance they brought to arranging flowers, leaders who could inspire absolute loyalty while maintaining personal humility and compassion. The samurai weren't just soldiers. They were living examples of what human beings can become when they commit themselves completely to a path of excellence and service. But perhaps the most remarkable secret of the samurai was their understanding of how individual excellence contributes to social harmony. They discovered that when individuals pursue perfection, not just for their own benefit, but as a form of service to something larger than themselves, the result is a society that functions with remarkable efficiency and stability. The samurai period in Japan saw the development of agricultural techniques that supported population densities that shouldn't have been sustainable, architectural innovations that created buildings capable of surviving earthquakes that would destroy modern structures, artistic achievements that still inspire wonder and admiration centuries later, and social institutions that maintained peace and prosperity for hundreds of years. All of this emerged from a civilization organized around the principle that the highest goal of human life is the perfection of character through service, that individual development and social responsibility are not separate goals, but aspects of the same fundamental commitment. The samurai discovered something that most civilizations never learn, that true power comes not from controlling others, but from mastering oneself. That true security comes not from accumulating possessions or building defenses, but from developing the inner qualities that allow a person to respond skillfully to whatever arises. And they developed practical methods for cultivating these qualities, methods that worked so well they created a civilization that lasted for centuries, and whose influence continues to shape the world today. As we journey deeper into the hidden world of the samurai, it becomes clear that their greatest secret wasn't a technique or a philosophy, it was their understanding of human potential itself. Their recognition that what most people consider the normal limits of human capability are actually just the starting point, that with proper training and commitment, it's possible to develop levels of skill, awareness, and effectiveness that seem supernatural but are simply the natural result of dedicated practice. The samurai civilization was essentially an 800-year experiment in human development, an exploration of how far the human spirit can go when it's given proper guidance and unlimited permission to excel. And the results of that experiment, the discoveries that emerged from centuries of systematic exploration of human potential, these discoveries remain available to anyone willing to embrace the samurai approach to life and training. The technical innovations that emerged from samurai civilization were as remarkable as their philosophical and spiritual achievements. The Japanese during the samurai period developed technologies that were centuries ahead of anything available in other parts of the world, and many of these innovations arose directly from the samurai's obsession with perfection and their unique approach to problem solving. Consider, for example, the architectural techniques that allowed Japanese carpenters to build structures that could survive earthquakes, typhoons, and centuries of use without nails, bolts, or any form of metal fastening. These buildings, temples, castles, and houses that are still standing after hundreds of years, represent engineering solutions that modern architects are only beginning to understand. The secret was the development of joinery techniques, so sophisticated that wooden structures could flex and move with seismic forces without losing their structural integrity. But these techniques weren't developed through trial and error. They emerged from the samurai's systematic study of natural principles and their application of martial arts concepts to architectural problems. The same principles that allowed a samurai swordsman to maintain perfect balance while moving through complex combat sequences were applied to building design, creating structures that could maintain their stability while adapting to changing external forces. The same attention to detail that a samurai brought to sword maintenance was applied to woodworking, creating joinery so precise that pieces would fit together with tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters and would actually become tighter and stronger over time as the wood aged and settled. The result was buildings that were not just functional but beautiful, not just durable but harmonious, structures that seemed to grow out of their natural surroundings rather than being imposed upon them. Similar innovations emerged in every field that the samurai touched. They developed metallurgical techniques that produced steel alloys with properties that modern science is still trying to understand. They created farming methods that could support large populations on relatively small amounts of land without depleting the soil, methods that modern permaculture practitioners are now rediscovering and adapting. They developed educational systems that could take ordinary children and transform them into highly skilled, highly ethical, highly effective adults, systems that produced literacy rates and mathematical competency that wouldn't be matched in other countries for centuries. They created forms of government that could maintain stability and prosperity without the massive bureaucracies and enforcement mechanisms that other civilizations required, systems based on shared values and voluntary compliance rather than external control and punishment. And underlying all of these innovations was a fundamental insight about how to approach problems, an insight that emerged directly from their martial arts training and their spiritual practice. The samurai learned to see every challenge as an opportunity for growth, every obstacle as a teacher, every problem as a chance to develop new capabilities. They approached technical challenges with the same mindset they brought to spiritual development, seeking not just to solve immediate problems, but to understand the deeper principles that would allow them to handle any similar situation that might arise in the future. This approach led to innovations that were not just clever solutions to specific problems, but discoveries of general principles that could be applied in countless different contexts. The samurai's understanding of balance, timing, and efficiency in combat translated directly into innovations in engineering, agriculture, and social organization. Their insights into human psychology and motivation informed their approaches to education, leadership, and conflict resolution. Their appreciation for beauty and harmony influenced everything from city planning to industrial design. The integration of practical skill with spiritual understanding, the combination of technical expertise with ethical commitment, the marriage of individual excellence with social responsibility. These characteristics made the samurai not just effective warriors, but effective innovators and problem solvers in every field they entered. And their innovations weren't just advanced for their time, many of them remain superior to contemporary alternatives. Modern attempts to rebuild traditional Japanese temples using traditional methods often discover that the ancient techniques produce results that are stronger, more durable, and more beautiful than what can be achieved with modern tools and materials. Contemporary martial artists who study classical samurai techniques often find that the traditional methods are more efficient and more effective than modern fighting systems, not despite their age, but because of the centuries of refinement and testing that went into their development. Modern business leaders who study samurai approaches to leadership and organization often discover principles and practices that are more effective than contemporary management theories, approaches that create higher levels of productivity, loyalty, and satisfaction while requiring less supervision and enforcement. The samurai civilization's technical achievements weren't just historical curiosities, they represent discoveries about how to organize human activity that remain relevant and valuable today. But perhaps their most important innovation was their discovery of how to create a learning culture, a society in which every individual was committed to continuous improvement, and every institution was designed to support and encourage that commitment. The samurai period in Japan saw explosions of innovation and creativity in every field precisely because the underlying culture valued excellence, rewarded improvement, and provided systematic support for anyone who wanted to develop their capabilities. This wasn't just about martial arts or military technology, it was about creating social conditions that would naturally produce innovation and excellence in whatever field needed attention. The samurai discovered that when you create a culture that values mastery, when you provide systematic training and support for anyone who wants to excel, when you organize society around principles of continuous improvement and mutual support, the result is a level of collective capability and achievement that far exceeds what any individual could accomplish alone. And this discovery, this understanding of how to create cultures of excellence, remains one of their most valuable contributions to human knowledge. As we explore the hidden depths of samurai civilization, we begin to see that their greatest achievement wasn't their individual prowess or their military victories, it was their creation of a social system that could consistently produce human beings operating at levels of excellence that most civilizations never achieve. The samurai weren't just an exceptional group of individuals, they were the product of an exceptional approach to human development, an approach that remains available to anyone willing to embrace their principles and practices. The spiritual dimensions of samurai civilization were perhaps even more remarkable than their technical achievements. The samurai developed forms of spiritual practice that were uniquely their own, approaches to meditation, consciousness development, and relationship with the divine that emerged from their particular combination of constant proximity to death and absolute commitment to excellence. The foundation of samurai spirituality was the recognition that life and death are not opposites but complementary aspects of a single reality. This wasn't just an intellectual understanding, it was a lived realization that transformed every aspect of how they related to existence itself. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid thinking about death, pushing away awareness of mortality in an attempt to feel secure and comfortable. The samurai did exactly the opposite. they cultivated constant awareness of death, not as something morbid or depressing, but as something that gave life meaning, urgency, and beauty. This practice, this daily contemplation of mortality, led to a form of consciousness that was both incredibly grounded and incredibly free. Grounded because they were always aware of the preciousness and fragility of each moment, free because they had transcended the normal fears and detachments that bind most people to limited ways of thinking and acting. The samurai developed meditation practices specifically designed to cultivate this consciousness, practices that involved not just sitting quietly, but actively confronting and dissolving the psychological barriers that prevent most people from fully embracing life. They would meditate in cemeteries, spending nights among the graves to become familiar with death as a natural part of existence. They would practice forms of breathwork that involved deliberately entering states that resembled dying, learning to remain calm and aware, even as consciousness seemed to be slipping away. They would engage in vision quests and fasting practices that pushed their minds and bodies to the absolute limits of endurance, discovering that what they had thought were their limits were actually just the boundaries of their comfort zones. These practices weren't undertaken for their own sake. They were designed to develop specific qualities of mind and character that would make the samurai more effective in every aspect of life. Courage that came not from ignorance of danger, but from familiarity with it. Calmness that came not from absence of challenge, but from confidence in their ability to handle whatever arose. Compassion that came not from sentimentality, but from deep understanding of the shared human condition. The spiritual training of the samurai produced individuals who were simultaneously the most peaceful and the most dangerous people in their society. Peaceful because they had transcended the internal conflicts and fears that drive most human aggression. Dangerous because they had developed capabilities that most people never imagine are possible. This paradox, this combination of profound gentleness with absolute lethality, was the hallmark of the fully developed samurai. Warriors who could kill without hatred, leaders who could exercise absolute authority without ego, teachers who could demand impossible standards while maintaining infinite patience. The development of this consciousness required not just individual practice but community support. The samurai created institutions, temples, schools, and training centers, specifically designed to nurture and sustain this level of spiritual development. These institutions weren't just places where techniques were taught, they were complete environments for human transformation, places where every aspect of daily life was organized to support the development of excellence, where the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual dimensions of training were completely integrated. Students in these environments would spend years, sometimes decades, undergoing systematic training that would gradually dissolve all the limitations and conditioning that prevent most people from accessing their full potential. They would study not just martial arts, but poetry, philosophy, mathematics, music, and every other field of human knowledge. Not because these subjects were useful in themselves, but because mastery in any field develops qualities of mind that transfer to every other area of life. They would practice not just physical techniques, but forms of mental training that would develop concentration, clarity, and emotional stability that most people never experience. They would cultivate not just individual skills, but the capacity for seamless cooperation and mutual support that would allow groups of samurai to function with a level of coordination and effectiveness that seemed supernatural to outside observers. The result was the development of human beings who represented something like the peak of what's possible within normal human parameters. Individuals who had developed their physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual capabilities to levels that approach the theoretical maximum of human potential. And these weren't just isolated examples of exceptional individuals. The samurai training system could consistently produce such people. It was a replicable process, a systematic approach to human development that worked reliably when properly applied. The spiritual insights that emerged from this systematic exploration of human potential were profound and far-reaching. The samurai discovered that consciousness is far more flexible and capable than most people realize, that with proper training, it's possible to develop levels of awareness, control, and effectiveness that seem impossible from ordinary perspectives. They discovered that the boundaries between mind and body, between self and environment, between individual and group, are much more fluid than they appear, and that learning to work with this fluidity opens up possibilities for action and achievement that are unavailable to people operating from more rigid conceptual frameworks. They discovered that courage, compassion, wisdom, and strength are not fixed character traits but skills that can be systematically developed, and that when these qualities are cultivated together, they create a form of human excellence that transcends anything that can be achieved through developing them separately. Most importantly, they discovered that this level of development is not reserved for special individuals or dependent on extraordinary circumstances. It's available to anyone willing to undertake the necessary training and maintain the necessary commitment. The spiritual legacy of the samurai continues to influence Japanese culture and increasingly, global culture as well. The principles and practices they developed for consciousness transformation have found their way into everything from modern psychotherapy to corporate training programs, from athletic performance enhancement to artistic education. But the deepest secrets of samurai spirituality remain largely hidden, preserved in small communities of practitioners who continue the ancient traditions with the same dedication and intensity that characterized the original samurai training. These modern inheritors of the samurai tradition, scattered in hidden temples and discreet training centers throughout Japan and increasingly around the world, continue to explore the frontiers of human potential using methods that were developed centuries ago, but remain as effective today as they were in feudal Japan. Their work represents a living laboratory for understanding what human beings are truly capable of when they commit themselves completely to a path of excellence and service, and their discoveries, their ongoing exploration of consciousness, capability, and human potential, continue to push the boundaries of what science considers possible. The influence of samurai civilization extends far beyond Japan, far beyond martial arts, far beyond anything most people realize. In the corporate boardrooms of Silicon Valley, executives study samurai principles of strategy and leadership. In the training centers of elite military units, soldiers learn meditation and mental conditioning techniques that were originally developed by warrior monks 800 years ago. In hospitals and rehabilitation centers, therapists use breathing techniques and movement practices derived from classical martial arts to help patients recover from injuries and illnesses that conventional medicine struggles to treat. In schools and universities, educators apply samurai principles of gradual development and mutual support to create learning environments that produce levels of achievement that were previously thought impossible. The samurai approach to excellence, their integration of spiritual practice with practical skill, their understanding of how individual development contributes to collective capability, these insights have quietly become part of the foundation of modern approaches to human development in fields ranging from sports psychology to organizational management. But to truly grasp the magnitude of what the samurai achieved, we need to understand the complete scope of their civilization. This wasn't just a military caste that happened to develop some interesting philosophies. This was a comprehensive reimagining of what human society could become when organized around principles of excellence, honor, and continuous development. The samurai created educational systems that were unlike anything else in the world. Their approach to learning wasn't based on memorizing information or following rigid curricula. It was based on developing the whole person through systematic cultivation of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual capabilities. A young samurai's education would begin almost from birth, not with formal lessons, but with immersion in an environment where excellence was the natural standard. Children would observe masters at work, watching how a tea ceremony could become a meditation on perfection, how the arrangement of flowers could teach principles of balance and harmony, how the writing of calligraphy could develop precision and grace that would carry over into every other activity. They learned not through abstract instruction but through direct participation in activities that required increasing levels of skill and awareness. A child might spend years learning to sit properly, not just physically, but with a kind of mental composure that would allow him to remain calm and focused under any circumstances. They would practice breathing exercises that weren't just physical conditioning, but training in consciousness control, learning to regulate their internal state so completely that external circumstances would have minimal impact on their performance or well-being. They would study music, poetry, and visual arts, not as entertainment or cultural refinement, but as systematic methods for developing sensitivity, creativity, and aesthetic judgment that would inform every aspect of their lives. And underlying all of this was training in what the samurai called zanshin, continuous awareness, the ability to remain completely present and alert to everything happening around them, while simultaneously maintaining inner calm and clarity. This wasn't just useful for combat, it was a life skill that made samurai extraordinarily effective in every situation they encountered. They could read the subtleties of social situations with remarkable accuracy. They could detect deception or hidden intentions almost instantaneously. They could respond to changing circumstances with speed and appropriateness that seemed supernatural to people who hadn't undergone similar training. The educational methods that produced these capabilities were based on principles that modern neuroscience is only beginning to understand. The samurai discovered that the brain's capacity for learning and adaptation is far greater than most people realize, and that with proper training, it's possible to develop levels of cognitive and perceptual ability that approach the theoretical limits of human potential. They understood that attention is a skill that can be systematically developed, that with practice it's possible to achieve states of concentration so complete that a person becomes effectively immune to distraction, fatigue, or emotional disruption. They discovered that physical and mental training are not separate activities but aspects of a single process, that developing the body's capabilities necessarily involves developing the mind's capabilities, and vice versa. They realized that learning is most effective when it engages the whole person, when intellectual understanding is combined with emotional engagement, physical practice, and spiritual development. These insights led to training methods that were extraordinarily efficient and effective. A student who underwent proper samurai education could achieve in a few years levels of skill and understanding that might take decades to develop through conventional approaches. But the efficiency of samurai education wasn't just about accelerated learning. It was about developing capabilities that most educational systems don't even recognize as possible. The ability to learn new skills with remarkable speed by applying principles derived from previous training, the capacity to remain calm and effective under extreme pressure, the skill of reading situations and people with extraordinary accuracy, the capability of making complex decisions quickly while considering multiple factors and long-term consequences. These were considered normal outcomes of proper samurai education. Modern attempts to understand and replicate samurai educational methods have led to innovations in everything from military training to corporate development programs. The principles they discovered, the techniques they developed, the systematic approaches they created, these continue to offer guidance for anyone interested in maximizing human learning and development. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of samurai education was its integration of individual development with social responsibility. Students didn't just learn skills for their own benefit, they learned to see their personal development as a form of service to their community and to future generations. This perspective, this understanding that individual excellence is ultimately meaningful only when it contributes to collective flourishing, created a form of motivation and commitment that was far more sustainable and fulfilling than purely self-centered approaches to achievement. The samurai discovered that when people pursue excellence not just for personal gain, but as a way of honoring their teachers, serving their community, and contributing to the greater good, they develop levels of motivation and perseverance that are impossible to achieve through self-interest alone. This insight, this recognition of the interconnectedness of individual and collective development, became one of the foundational principles of samurai civilization, and remains one of their most valuable contributions to understanding how to create cultures of excellence and achievement. The artistic achievements of samurai civilization were as extraordinary as their martial and spiritual accomplishments. The samurai didn't just practice arts as hobbies or cultural refinements. They elevated artistic practice to the level of spiritual discipline and used it as a means of developing capabilities that would enhance every aspect of their lives. The tea ceremony, ikebana flower arrangement, calligraphy, poetry, garden design, architecture, these weren't separate from the warrior's path but integral parts of it. The same qualities of mind that made a samurai effective in combat, precision, timing, awareness, emotional control, aesthetic sensitivity, were systematically developed through artistic practice. Consider the Japanese tea ceremony. What appears to outside observers as an elaborate social ritual was actually a form of moving meditation designed to cultivate specific mental and spiritual qualities. Every gesture, every movement, every moment of the ceremony was precisely choreographed to develop mindfulness, grace, humility, and attention to detail. A master of the tea ceremony could use the simple act of preparing and serving tea to enter states of consciousness that were indistinguishable from the deepest forms of meditation. The ceremony became a way of practicing the same mental disciplines that would allow a warrior to remain calm and focused in the chaos of battle. But the tea ceremony was more than individual practice. It was a form of social art that could create experiences of harmony and connection that transcended ordinary human interaction. Participants in a properly conducted ceremony would often report feelings of profound peace and unity that lasted long after the ceremony ended. Similar principles guided every form of artistic practice in samurai culture. Calligraphy wasn't just about creating beautiful writing. It was about developing the kind of mental control and emotional stability that would allow the calligrapher to express his deepest spiritual insights through the simple act of brush on paper. The practice required years of training to develop the physical coordination necessary to control the brush with perfect precision, but it also required spiritual development to achieve the state of consciousness in which the calligrapher's true nature could flow directly through his hand onto the page. Masters of calligraphy spoke of entering states in which they became transparent, in which the brush seemed to move by itself, guided by something deeper than conscious intention. In these states, they could create works that captured and conveyed spiritual truths that were impossible to express through ordinary language. Flower arrangement, ikebana, was similarly profound. What might appear to be simple decoration was actually a form of meditation on the principles of natural harmony and cosmic order. The practitioner would study the essential nature of each flower, each branch, each element of the arrangement, seeking to understand and express the deeper patterns that govern all natural phenomena. A master of ikebana could create arrangements that seemed to capture the essence of entire seasons, that could evoke specific emotions or states of consciousness in viewers, that could serve as three-dimensional poems expressing insights too subtle for words. The gardens created by samurai landscape designers were perhaps the most remarkable artistic achievements of their civilization. These weren't just beautiful spaces for relaxation or contemplation. They were carefully designed environments intended to facilitate specific forms of spiritual and psychological development. Every element of a traditional Japanese garden, the placement of stones, the flow of water, the selection and positioning of plants, the creation of sight lines and spatial relationships, was determined by deep understanding of how environmental factors influence human consciousness. Walking through such a garden wasn't just an aesthetic experience. It was a form of moving meditation that could systematically induce states of calm, clarity, and insight. The garden became a kind of external mandala, a physical representation of ideal mental and spiritual states that could help visitors access those states within themselves. Modern research in environmental psychology has confirmed what the samurai understood intuitively, that carefully designed spaces can have profound effects on human mood, cognitive function, and spiritual well-being. The principles they developed for garden design continue to influence contemporary approaches to therapeutic environments, meditation spaces, and urban planning. The poetry created by samurai warriors was unlike anything produced in other cultures. These weren't professional poets writing for entertainment or artistic recognition. They were warriors who used poetry as a form of spiritual practice and a way of processing the profound experiences that came with their way of life. Samurai poetry often focused on themes of impermanence, beauty, and the relationship between life and death. But these weren't abstract philosophical concepts. They were lived realities that the warriors encountered daily in their training and their service. A samurai might compose a poem while preparing for battle, using the discipline of finding precisely the right words to express his state of mind as a way of achieving the mental clarity and emotional equilibrium necessary for effective action. They might write poetry while contemplating nature, using careful observation of natural phenomena as a way of understanding deeper principles that could guide their conduct and their spiritual development. The constraint of traditional poetic forms, particularly the haiku with its strict syllable count and seasonal references, wasn't seen as limiting but as a form of spiritual discipline that could concentrate and intensify the poet's expression. Creating a perfect haiku required the same qualities of mind that made a samurai effective in other areas: precision, patience, deep observation, and the ability to distill complex experiences into their essential elements. The architectural innovations of the samurai period were equally remarkable. Samurai castles weren't just military fortifications, they were sophisticated expressions of aesthetic, spiritual, and practical principles that reflected the deepest values of samurai civilization. These structures had to serve multiple functions. They needed to be defensible against military attack. They needed to serve as administrative centers for complex political and economic activities. They needed to house large numbers of people in comfort and harmony. And they needed to embody the aesthetic and spiritual ideals that gave samurai culture its distinctive character. The solutions that samurai architects developed were masterpieces of integrated design. Castle complexes that could withstand siege warfare while maintaining the refined elegance that was essential to samurai culture, buildings that could house hundreds of people while preserving the sense of harmony and order that was central to their social philosophy, structures that demonstrated technical mastery while expressing profound spiritual insights. The construction techniques developed for these projects required unprecedented levels of skill and coordination. Master carpenters had to work with mathematical precision to create joinery that would support massive structures without metal fasteners. Engineers had to design water systems that could supply entire communities while maintaining the aesthetic qualities essential to samurai culture. Landscape architects had to integrate buildings with natural settings in ways that enhanced both the practical function and the spiritual significance of the spaces. The result was architectural achievements that remain unsurpassed in their combination of technical excellence, aesthetic refinement, and spiritual depth. Buildings that functioned perfectly for their intended purposes, while serving as three-dimensional expressions of the philosophical and spiritual principles that guided samurai civilization. These architectural innovations weren't just impressive technical achievements. They were demonstrations of what becomes possible when technical skill is guided by deep spiritual understanding and commitment to excellence in every aspect of life. The influence of samurai architectural principles continues to shape contemporary design in Japan and increasingly around the world. Modern architects study traditional Japanese buildings not just for their historical interest but for the insights they provide into creating spaces that support human flourishing at the deepest levels. The integration of artistic practice with martial training, the use of aesthetic disciplines as methods of spiritual development, the creation of environments designed to facilitate human transformation, these innovations represent some of the most sophisticated approaches to human development ever created. The samurai understood that art isn't separate from life, but a way of transforming life into art, that aesthetic sensitivity isn't decoration, but a fundamental human capability that can enhance every aspect of existence, that beauty isn't luxury, but necessity for the full development of human potential. These insights, these approaches to integrating artistic practice with spiritual development and practical skill, remain available to anyone willing to embrace the samurai understanding of what it means to live a truly complete human life. Now, as we move deeper into the most closely guarded secrets of samurai civilization, we come to perhaps their most remarkable discovery. The samurai developed what they called the way of no way, an approach to action that transcended all conventional understanding of human capability and limitation. This wasn't just advanced martial arts technique, it was a fundamental reorientation of consciousness that allowed the samurai to operate from a state of awareness that modern psychology is only beginning to recognize as possible. The foundation of this approach was the dissolution of the artificial boundary between self and environment, the recognition that what we normally think of as separate entities, the warrior and his opponent, the individual and the situation, the actor and the action, are actually aspects of a single unified process. When a samurai achieved mastery of this understanding, when he could operate from this state of unified awareness, his capabilities would expand far beyond anything that seemed possible from ordinary perspectives. He could sense his opponent's intentions before the opponent was consciously aware of them himself, not through supernatural perception, but through sensitivity to subtle cues that are always present but normally ignored. He could respond to attacks with perfect timing and efficiency, not through faster reflexes, but through action that arose spontaneously from direct perception of what the situation required. He could remain calm and effective in chaotic situations that would overwhelm most people, not through emotional suppression, but through understanding that chaos is only apparent, that underneath surface confusion, there are always patterns and opportunities that can be perceived and utilized by properly trained awareness. This state of consciousness, this way of operating from unified awareness rather than isolated self-interest, was the ultimate goal of all samurai training. Everything else, the physical conditioning, the technical skills, the spiritual practices, the artistic refinements, All of this was preparation for accessing and maintaining this fundamental reorientation of human consciousness. Modern neuroscience has begun to identify the brain states associated with this kind of unified awareness, the dissolution of the default mode network that normally maintains the sense of separate self, the activation of neural circuits associated with flow states and peak performance, the integration of normally disparate brain regions into coherent, synchronized patterns. But the samurai achieved these states not through technological intervention, but through systematic training methods that could reliably produce profound alterations of consciousness, methods that remain available to anyone willing to undertake the necessary preparation and practice. The practical applications of this training extended far beyond martial arts. Samurai who had achieved mastery of unified awareness became extraordinarily effective administrators, teachers, artists, and leaders, not because they had learned specific skills in these areas, but because they had developed the fundamental capabilities that underlie excellence in any field. They could perceive the essential patterns in complex situations with remarkable clarity. They could respond to challenges with creativity and appropriateness that seemed to arise from nowhere. They could inspire others and coordinate group activities with an effectiveness that appeared magical, but was simply the natural result of operating from a consciousness that wasn't limited by the normal boundaries of individual self-interest. This understanding, this recognition of the possibility of operating from unified awareness rather than isolated self-interest, was perhaps the deepest secret of samurai civilization. It was the foundation that made all their other achievements possible, the source of their remarkable effectiveness in every field they entered, the explanation for capabilities that seemed supernatural but were actually just the natural result of removing artificial limitations on human consciousness. The training methods that could produce this transformation were closely guarded secrets, passed down through generations of masters in unbroken lineages that sometimes spanned centuries. These methods weren't written down in detail. They were transmitted through direct personal instruction from teacher to student in relationships that required absolute trust, commitment, and dedication. Even today, in the hidden training centers where these traditions are still maintained, the deepest teachings are reserved for students who have demonstrated not just technical competence, but the character qualities necessary to use such knowledge responsibly. Because the samurai understood something that most people never realize, that consciousness is the most powerful force in human existence, and that with sufficient training and commitment, individual consciousness can be developed to levels that seem to transcend normal human limitations. They knew that such capabilities could be dangerous if possessed by people who hadn't undergone the spiritual and ethical development necessary to use them wisely, and so they created safeguards and requirements that ensured these teachings would only be transmitted to individuals who had proven themselves worthy through years of dedicated service and character development. These safeguards remain in place today, protecting the deepest secrets of samurai training, while ensuring that they continue to be available to those who approach them with proper understanding and commitment. The modern rediscovery of these ancient methods, the scientific validation of capabilities that were once dismissed as legend or superstition, the growing recognition that human consciousness is far more flexible and powerful than conventional psychology acknowledges, all of this points toward a future in which the insights and methods of samurai civilization may become far more widely available and applicable. But that future will require the same qualities that the samurai insisted upon: dedication to excellence, commitment to ethical development, willingness to undergo the prolonged training necessary to develop capabilities that most people never imagine are possible, and understanding that true power comes not from controlling others, but from mastering oneself. The hidden history of the samurai, the secrets we've explored tonight, these aren't just fascinating stories from the past. They're previews of human potential that remains largely untapped, maps to territories of consciousness and capability that await exploration by anyone willing to embrace the samurai approach to human development. The path they mapped out, the methods they developed, the insights they discovered, these remain as relevant today as they were 8 centuries ago. The only question is whether we have the dedication, the courage, and the vision necessary to follow their example and explore for ourselves the extraordinary capabilities that emerge when human beings commit themselves completely to paths of excellence and service. As we near the end of our journey through the hidden world of the samurai, it's worth reflecting on what we've discovered together. We've seen how a small group of warriors in medieval Japan created a civilization that was unlike anything else in human history, a society organized around principles of excellence, honor, and continuous development that produced innovations in every field of human activity. We've explored their training methods that could develop capabilities that seem supernatural but are actually just the natural result of removing artificial limitations on human potential, their spiritual practices that could transform consciousness in ways that modern psychology is only beginning to understand, their technical innovations that were centuries ahead of their time and remain superior to many contemporary alternatives. We've discovered how their approach to education could produce human beings who are simultaneously warriors, artists, philosophers, administrators, and spiritual teachers, individuals who had developed all aspects of human potential in an integrated and balanced way. We've seen how their economic and social innovations created unprecedented stability and prosperity, without the environmental destruction and social inequality that characterize most civilizations, how their understanding of the relationship between individual development and collective flourishing led to forms of social organization that modern communities are still trying to understand and replicate. Most importantly, we've glimpsed the deepest secret of samurai civilization, their discovery that human consciousness is far more flexible and powerful than most people realize, and that with proper training and commitment, it's possible to develop levels of awareness, capability, and effectiveness that transcend everything that normal psychology considers possible. The samurai weren't superhuman. They were human beings who had discovered what becomes possible when ordinary people commit themselves completely to paths of excellence and service. They showed that the limitations most of us accept as inevitable are actually just the boundaries of our current understanding and commitment. Their legacy isn't just historical, it's prophetic. They created a model of human development and social organization that addresses challenges our contemporary world is only beginning to recognize as important. Their integration of individual excellence with collective responsibility, their balance of technological innovation with spiritual development, their understanding of how to create sustainable prosperity without environmental destruction, these achievements offer guidance for problems we're struggling with today. The secrets we've explored tonight, the training methods, spiritual practices, and life principles that made the samurai the most remarkable human beings in history. These remain available to anyone willing to embrace their approach to life and learning. The hidden civilization of Japan, the lost world of the samurai, isn't really lost at all. It lives on in the hearts and minds of people around the world who continue to explore the territories of human excellence that the samurai were the first to map systematically. If this journey into the depths of samurai wisdom has inspired you to explore these territories for yourself, if you're curious about what you might discover, if you committed yourself to a path of excellence and service, then you're already beginning to walk the way of the warrior. The samurai understood that this path isn't just about martial arts or military service, it's about becoming the best possible version of yourself, pursuing mastery not for ego gratification, but as a form of service to something larger than yourself, organizing your life around principles of honor, courage, and compassion that transform not just your own experience but the experience of everyone you encounter. This path remains open. This commitment to excellence and service is still available. This exploration of human potential continues to call to anyone with the courage to answer. And if you'd like to continue this exploration with us, if you want to dive deeper into the hidden wisdom of remarkable civilizations and the timeless insights they discovered about human potential, then subscribe to Simply About Earth. We'll keep uncovering the secrets that ancient cultures preserved for future generations, the forgotten innovations of extraordinary human beings, and the discoveries about consciousness and capability that remain as relevant today as they were centuries ago. As you settle into sleep tonight, let your mind drift gently through the misty landscapes we've explored together, the hidden temples where consciousness-transforming practices are still preserved, the training centers where ordinary people discover extraordinary capabilities, the quiet communities where the deepest secrets of human potential continue to be explored and slowly revealed. Let these images flow through your dreams like memories from a half-forgotten life, glimpses of what becomes possible when human beings dedicate themselves completely to paths of excellence and service. Rest in the knowledge that the capabilities we've explored tonight, the levels of skill, awareness, and effectiveness that the samurai achieved, these remain available to anyone willing to embrace their understanding of what it truly means to be human. Sleep peacefully, knowing that you've touched something eternal, something that transcends the boundaries of any particular time or culture, something that speaks to the deepest possibilities of human existence. The way of the warrior isn't a relic of the past. It's a living path that continues to offer guidance and inspiration to anyone who wants to discover what they're truly capable of achieving. Sweet dreams, fellow explorers of human potential, and remember that every journey into the mysteries of consciousness begins with a single step, a single commitment to excellence, a single decision to pursue your own development, not just for personal benefit, but as a gift to the world. The samurai knew that this decision, this commitment to becoming the finest possible version of yourself, is the foundation of everything worthwhile in human existence. Their legacy, their continuing influence on everyone who chooses to walk this path, ripples outward like waves on an infinite ocean, touching lives and inspiring transformation in ways that will continue for generations to come. This is Simply About Earth, where we explore the hidden depths of human history and human potential, where we uncover the secrets that remarkable civilizations discovered and preserved for those who would come after, where we celebrate the extraordinary capabilities that emerge when ordinary people commit themselves to extraordinary paths. Until we meet again in the realm of hidden histories and forgotten wisdom, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep discovering just how remarkable you truly are. The mist is settling over the mountains of ancient Japan. The temples are growing quiet. The last echoes of sword fade into the silence of eternity, but the spirit of the samurai, the commitment to excellence, the dedication to service, the understanding of human potential, these live on, waiting for the next generation of explorers to discover and carry forward. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with the wisdom of warriors and the possibilities of transformation that await anyone brave enough to walk the pathless path of human excellence. This is Simply About Earth, signing off until our next journey into the miraculous and the mysterious, the hidden and the extraordinary, the lost civilizations that continue to teach us what it means to be truly, completely, magnificently human. But to fully understand the continuing relevance of samurai civilization, we need to look at what they discovered about the nature of human potential itself. The samurai were perhaps the first civilization to systematically explore the question of what human beings are actually capable of when all artificial limitations are removed. Not just physical limitations, but psychological, emotional, and spiritual limitations as well. Their training methods were designed to identify and dissolve every form of conditioning, every assumption, every fear-based limitation that prevents people from accessing their full capabilities. And what they discovered, what centuries of systematic exploration revealed, was that the normal boundaries of human performance are much more flexible than anyone had imagined. Under proper conditions, with appropriate training and support, human beings can develop levels of skill, awareness, and effectiveness that appear supernatural but are actually just the natural result of removing the obstacles that normally prevent such development. The samurai demonstrated that it's possible to train the mind to remain calm and focused under any circumstances, that it's possible to develop physical capabilities that far exceed what most people consider normal human limits, that it's possible to cultivate forms of intuition and awareness that provide access to information that the normal senses don't detect. They showed that it's possible to develop such mastery of emotional and psychological states that external circumstances become largely irrelevant to internal experience, that it's possible to function effectively in any situation, regardless of how chaotic, dangerous, or unprecedented it might be. Most remarkably, they proved that these capabilities are not reserved for exceptional individuals, that with proper training and commitment, they can be developed by anyone willing to undertake the necessary work. The samurai training system was essentially a technology for human optimization, a systematic method for developing all aspects of human potential in an integrated and balanced way. And this technology, refined through centuries of experimentation and application, remains one of the most effective approaches to human development ever created. The secrets of this technology, the specific methods and principles that made it so effective, these secrets are what we're still discovering today as researchers and practitioners around the world work to understand and apply samurai insights to contemporary challenges. In the hidden archives of ancient temples, in the oral traditions preserved by secretive martial arts schools, in the practices of communities that have maintained unbroken connections to the original samurai training methods. These secrets continue to be preserved and slowly revealed to those who demonstrate the dedication and character necessary to use them responsibly. And as these secrets emerge, as modern science begins to validate what the samurai discovered through direct experience, we're beginning to understand that their civilization wasn't just historically significant, it was prophetic. The samurai created a model of human development and social organization that addresses challenges that our contemporary world is only beginning to recognize as important. Their integration of individual excellence with collective responsibility, their balance of technological innovation with spiritual development, their understanding of how to create sustainable prosperity without environmental destruction, these achievements offer guidance for problems that we're struggling with today. The hidden history of the samurai isn't just an interesting story about the past. It's a treasure trove of insights and methods that remain directly relevant to anyone who wants to develop their full potential and contribute to creating a better world. The economic system that emerged from samurai civilization was as innovative and sophisticated as their spiritual and technical achievements. The samurai created forms of economic organization that sustained prosperity and stability for centuries without the boom and bust cycles that characterize most economic systems. The foundation of the samurai economy was the principle that true wealth comes not from accumulating resources, but from developing capabilities. Instead of focusing on extracting maximum short-term profit from land, labor, and materials, the samurai organized their economy around the goal of maximizing long-term productivity and sustainability. This led to agricultural practices that actually improved soil fertility over time, rather than depleting it, manufacturing techniques that created products designed to last for generations rather than becoming quickly obsolete, and trade relationships based on mutual benefit and long-term cooperation rather than short-term advantage. The samurai understood that economic activity is essentially a form of stewardship, that the goal of economic organization should be to create conditions that support the flourishing of all participants rather than the enrichment of a few at the expense of everyone else. This understanding led to innovations in economic organization that were centuries ahead of their time. The samurai developed forms of cooperative ownership and profit sharing that ensured that everyone who contributed to productive activity received a fair share of the benefits, systems of apprenticeship and skill development that created pathways for advancement based on merit rather than birth, and methods of resource allocation that prioritized essential needs while still providing incentives for innovation and excellence. The result was an economy that was both highly productive and remarkably stable. For hundreds of years, the samurai economic system supported population densities and standards of living that wouldn't be matched in other parts of the world until the Industrial Revolution, and it did so without creating the environmental destruction, social inequality, or psychological stress that characterize most modern economic systems. The secrets of samurai economic organization remain relevant today, as communities around the world search for alternatives to economic systems that seem increasingly unsustainable and dysfunctional. The principles they discovered, the methods they developed, the institutional innovations they created, these offer guidance for anyone interested in creating forms of economic activity that serve human flourishing rather than undermining it. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of samurai economic thinking was their understanding of the relationship between individual development and collective prosperity. They discovered that when individuals are committed to excellence and service, when they're developing their capabilities not just for personal benefit, but as a contribution to the larger community, the result is economic productivity and innovation that far exceeds what can be achieved through purely individual or purely collective approaches. This insight, this recognition that personal development and social responsibility are not competing goals, but complementary aspects of the same fundamental commitment, became the foundation of an economic system that created unprecedented levels of both individual fulfillment and collective prosperity. The samurai economy was organized around the principle that the best way to serve your own interests is to develop your capabilities in ways that benefit everyone, and that the best way to serve the collective good is to support and encourage the development of every individual. This principle guided everything from agricultural practices to manufacturing techniques, from trade relationships to educational investments, from resource allocation to technological innovation, and it worked. For centuries, it created conditions of prosperity and stability that most civilizations never achieve. The hidden wisdom of samurai economic thinking continues to influence contemporary approaches to business organization, community development, and economic policy. Companies that adopt samurai principles of long-term thinking, employee development, and stakeholder consideration consistently outperform competitors who focus solely on short-term profits. Communities that organize around samurai principles of mutual support, skill development, and collective responsibility demonstrate levels of resilience and prosperity that seem impossible from conventional economic perspectives. And individuals who apply samurai economic principles to their personal financial decisions, focusing on capability development rather than consumption, investing in relationships rather than just accumulations, thinking in decades rather than quarters, consistently achieve higher levels of both financial security and personal satisfaction. The economic legacy of the samurai isn't just historical, it's a living tradition that continues to offer guidance for anyone who wants to create prosperity in ways that serve human flourishing, rather than undermining it. As our exploration of the hidden secrets of the samurai draws toward its conclusion, we begin to see the full scope of what this remarkable civilization achieved. The samurai weren't just skilled warriors or effective administrators, they were architects of a complete approach to human existence that integrated individual development with collective responsibility in ways that no other civilization has matched. Their innovations in martial arts, spirituality, technology, economics, and social organization weren't separate achievements. They were all expressions of a single, coherent vision of what human life could become when organized around principles of excellence, service, and continuous development. The samurai discovered that when individuals commit themselves completely to developing their full potential, when they pursue mastery not for ego gratification, but as a form of service to something larger than themselves, when they organize their lives around principles of honor, courage, and compassion, the result is not just personal fulfillment, but collective prosperity and social harmony. This discovery, this understanding of how individual excellence contributes to collective flourishing, remains one of the most important insights in human history. And the methods the samurai developed for actualizing this understanding, the training systems, social institutions, and cultural practices they created, these remain available to anyone willing to embrace the samurai approach to life and learning. The hidden history of the samurai isn't just about what happened in medieval Japan. It's about what becomes possible when human beings commit themselves completely to a path of excellence and service. It's about the extraordinary capabilities that emerge when ordinary people are given proper training, ongoing support, and unlimited permission to develop their full potential. The secrets we've explored tonight, the training methods that produced superhuman capabilities, the spiritual practices that transcended normal limitations of consciousness, the social innovations that created unprecedented stability and prosperity, these aren't just historical curiosities, they're discoveries about human potential that remain as relevant today as they were 800 years ago. The samurai civilization demonstrated that what most people consider the normal limits of human capability are actually just the starting point, that with proper understanding and commitment, it's possible to develop levels of skill, awareness, and effectiveness that seem impossible from ordinary perspectives. Their greatest secret wasn't a technique or a philosophy. It was their recognition that human potential is essentially unlimited, that the only real boundaries are the ones we accept in our own minds, and that with proper training and support, any person can develop capabilities that transform not just their own life, but the lives of everyone they touch. This recognition, this fundamental insight into the nature of human potential, is the true hidden treasure of samurai civilization. It's a treasure that remains available to anyone willing to embrace the principles and practices that made the samurai the most remarkable warriors, leaders, and human beings in history. The modern inheritors of the samurai tradition continue to explore and develop these insights, pushing the boundaries of what's possible, discovering new applications for ancient wisdom, and demonstrating that the samurai approach to human development remains as effective today as it was in feudal Japan. In hidden training centers around the world, in discrete communities of practitioners who have maintained connections to the original traditions, in research laboratories where scientists study the effects of samurai-derived training methods, the exploration continues. and the discoveries emerging from this ongoing exploration suggest that we've only begun to understand what the samurai achieved, only started to uncover the full scope of their innovations, only glimpsed the true depth of their understanding of human potential. The lost civilization of Japan, the hidden secrets of the samurai, these aren't just stories from the past, they're blueprints for the future, guides for anyone who wants to discover what they're truly capable of, maps for the territory of human excellence that the samurai were the first to explore systematically. Tonight we've walked together through the misty mountains of feudal Japan, explored the hidden temples where warrior monks still practice ancient arts, uncovered secrets that have been preserved for centuries in oral traditions and discreet communities, and discovered that the influence of samurai civilization extends far beyond anything most people realize. We've seen how their innovations in martial arts, spirituality, technology, economics, and social organization were all expressions of a single coherent understanding of human potential, and how their methods for developing that potential remain as effective today as they were 800 years ago. We've explored the training systems that could transform ordinary people into extraordinary human beings, the spiritual practices that transcended normal limitations of consciousness, the social institutions that created unprecedented stability and prosperity, and the economic principles that sustained abundance without environmental destruction. Most importantly, we've discovered that the greatest secret of the samurai was their recognition that human potential is essentially unlimited, and that the methods they developed for actualizing that potential remain available to anyone willing to embrace their approach to life and learning. If this journey into the hidden depths of samurai civilization has inspired you to explore these territories of human excellence for yourself, if you're curious about how to apply samurai principles and practices to your own development and your own contribution to the world, then you're already beginning to walk the path that the samurai mapped out centuries ago. The way of the warrior isn't just about martial arts or military service. It's about committing yourself completely to developing your full potential as a human being, pursuing excellence not for ego gratification, but as a form of service, organizing your life around principles of honor, courage, and compassion that transform not just your own experience, but the experience of everyone you encounter. This path, this commitment to excellence and service, remains open to anyone willing to embrace it. The secrets we've explored tonight, the training methods, spiritual practices, and life principles that made the samurai the most remarkable human beings in history, these remain available to anyone willing to undertake the necessary work. The hidden civilization of Japan, the lost world of the samurai, isn't really lost at all. It lives on in the hearts and minds of people around the world, who continue to explore the territories of human excellence that the samurai were the first to map systematic. And if you'd like to continue this exploration, if you want to dive deeper into the secrets of human potential that ancient civilizations discovered and preserved for future generations, then subscribe to Simply About Earth. We'll continue uncovering the hidden wisdom of remarkable cultures, the forgotten innovations of extraordinary human beings, and the timeless insights that remain relevant to anyone who wants to develop their full potential and contribute to creating a better world. As you settle into sleep tonight, let your mind wander gently through the misty landscapes we've explored together, the hidden temples where ancient practices still transform human consciousness, the training centers where ordinary people discover extraordinary capabilities, the quiet communities where the deepest secrets of human potential continue to be preserved and slowly revealed. Let these images flow through your dreams like scenes from a half-remembered movie, glimpses of what becomes possible when human beings commit themselves completely to a path of excellence and service. Rest in the knowledge that the capabilities we've explored tonight, the levels of skill, awareness, and effectiveness that the samurai achieved, these remain available to anyone willing to embrace their approach to life and learning. Sleep peacefully, knowing that you've touched something eternal tonight, something that transcends the boundaries of any particular time or culture, something that speaks to the deepest possibilities of what it means to be human. The way of the warrior isn't just a historical curiosity, it's a living path that continues to offer guidance and inspiration to anyone who wants to discover what they're truly capable of achieving. Sweet dreams, fellow explorers, and remember that every journey into the mysteries of human potential begins with a single step, a single commitment to excellence, a single decision to pursue your own development, not just for personal benefit, but as a gift to the world. The samurai understood that this decision, this commitment to becoming the best possible version of yourself, is the foundation of everything worthwhile in human existence. And their legacy, their ongoing influence on everyone who chooses to walk this path, continues to ripple outward like waves on an infinite ocean, touching lives and inspiring transformation in ways that will continue for generations to come. This is Simply About Earth, where we explore the hidden depths of human history and human potential, where we uncover the secrets that remarkable civilizations discovered and preserved for those who would come after, where we celebrate the extraordinary capabilities that emerge when ordinary people commit themselves to paths of excellence and service. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep discovering just how remarkable you truly are. Good night.